I stood by the window of my new home, sipping my morning coffee, watching the mountains disappear behind thick clouds. It had been 10 years since I last attended the Harper family reunion, and this year, just like the past 9, no invitation had come. 10 years. 10 long years of silence, exclusion, and pretending I never existed. I used to cry about it. I used to beg my siblings to let me come back. Now, I just laughed. My name is Emily Harper, and I am 32 years old. The last time I was with my family, I was 22, naive, and desperate to be accepted. I believed that family meant unconditional love, but the Harpers proved me wrong in every possible way. I was the black sheep, the failure, the embarrassment. No matter how hard I tried, I was never enough. Back then, I worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. My father, Michael Harper, used to call me a disgrace for dropping out of college. My mother, Linda, never defended me. She just nodded silently like a background prop. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden child, the successful lawyer, the one they all worshipped. My younger sister, Madison, was the pretty one, the one who won beauty pageants and smiled for cameras. I was the middle child they wished they never had. I left after that night in the backyard when Ryan accused me of stealing his watch. He had accidentally left it on a bench, and when it went missing, everyone turned to me. No one asked questions. No one waited for proof. My father grabbed my arm, shoved a $20 bill into my hand, and told me to leave his property. They threw me out over a lie. I spent the night in my car, sobbing until sunrise. I never heard from any of them again. Until last week. It started with a random call from an unknown number. I let it ring out. Then came the email from Madison. It was brief, awkward, and fake. She said she was in town and wanted to catch up. I did not respond. Then Ryan called, then Linda. Suddenly, after a decade of silence, they were all trying to reach me. I knew something was off. People like them did not change. Not without a reason. What they did not know was that the girl they exiled a decade ago was no longer the same. In the years that followed, I rebuilt my life. I took night classes, earned a degree in finance, and started a small business. I turned that business into a consulting firm. I now owned multiple properties in North Carolina, including the massive estate I currently lived in. The one perched on a hill, with the winding private road and the iron gates. The one my family had no idea existed until it was too late. 3 days ago, I received an invitation to the Harper family reunion for the first time in 10 years. I laughed so hard I spilled my tea. I framed the invitation and hung it in my office, but I did not go. I had better plans. Yesterday, I sent out custom invitations. One to Ryan, one to Madison, one to Linda and Michael. Each envelope was sealed with gold wax and carried my new last name, Emily Carter. They would never recognize it. That was intentional. I did not tell them who the sender was. I only said there would be an exclusive networking event held at a luxury estate just outside Asheville, promising career-changing opportunities. They fell for it immediately. I knew their hunger for status had not changed. This morning, as I stood in my foyer, dressed in a silk emerald gown, heels echoing across marble floors, I watched the security cameras. The black SUV pulled up first. Ryan stepped out in a tailored suit, fixing his tie like he was ready for a press conference. Madison came next, her blonde hair flawless as always, her designer bag clutched tightly. Michael and Linda arrived last, a little older, a little grayer, but just as self-righteous. They walked toward the door, holding the invitations in their hands. I opened the door myself. Their expressions shifted instantly. Ryan squinted at me, confused. Madison froze mid-step. Michael looked like he had seen a ghost. Linda clutched her pearls. I smiled, stepped aside, and said the words I had rehearsed for years. "Welcome to my home. You are late." Michael was the first to speak, though his voice cracked slightly as he tried to keep his usual tone of authority. "This must be a mistake," he said. "We were invited to." "You were invited," I interrupted calmly, "by me." Their eyes darted around the foyer, taking in the grand staircase, the chandelier, the wall-length painting of mountain ranges that looked eerily similar to the view from the back balcony. Madison stepped forward and glanced at the marble flooring beneath her stilettos. "This is your house?" she whispered. I nodded. "All of it. The land too. Come in." They walked in slowly, like trespassers unsure if they would be caught. Linda stayed close to Michael, whispering something under her breath. Ryan's eyes scanned the hall as if trying to make sense of the situation. I let them stew in their confusion as I led them to the dining room. The table was set for 5. Sterling silver. Crystal glasses. Everything gleamed under the soft lighting. They hesitated to sit, unsure if this was some kind of elaborate trap. I took my seat at the head of the table. They followed. The silence was thick until Ryan leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table. "So, this event, you organized it?" I nodded again, pouring wine into my own glass but ignoring theirs. "Yes. I figured it was time to reconnect. You have all been so distant." Linda cleared her throat. "Emily, we did not know. We thought you. We were told you moved away. You were told I vanished, like trash swept under a rug." "I know." Madison flinched. She hated being called out, even subtly. Ryan's face darkened. "What exactly is this? Some kind of revenge dinner?" I sipped my wine slowly, savoring it. Then I stood and walked toward the large portrait above the fireplace. It was a painting of me, not the 22-year-old they remembered. It was the new version, older, wiser, and finally powerful. I turned and looked straight at Michael. "Do you remember the watch, Dad?" His face went pale. He blinked but said nothing. "The one I was accused of stealing. The one you claimed proved I was a thief." Ryan shifted in his seat, suddenly less confident. Madison looked at the floor. I smiled coldly. "You'll be glad to know that I found out who actually took it, a friend of yours, Bryce. He pawned it for drug money. I saw the footage 6 months later when I had enough money to track it down." Ryan opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "Save it." I walked around the table, standing behind each of them one by one. "All these years, you believed I was nothing. But I built an empire while you gossiped about my disappearance. I paid off your debts, quietly. I bought the land your firm wanted to develop on, Ryan. I rejected your proposal under a different name." Ryan's jaw clenched. I continued. "I funded Madison's beauty brand launch, the one that mysteriously got a silent investor. That was me. And you, Linda. You were approved for that medical grant last year, right? Guess who sat on the board that signed it?" Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you help us?" "Because I wanted to see if you would ever reach out without needing something. You never did." I walked back to the head of the table and sat down again. The tension in the room was unbearable. None of them touched their glasses. Then I dropped another blow. "I know about the Madison gasped. Ryan looked shocked. "I know your house was repossessed 2 months ago. That the reunion you held was not a celebration but a distraction. I know you were desperate, and this networking opportunity looked like your last shot." Michael's voice cracked. "Emily, we are your family." "No," I said firmly. "You were my family, until you made me feel like a stranger in my own blood." Then I stood again and opened the envelope that had been resting beside my plate. I pulled out 4 pieces of paper and passed them down the table. Linda's hands trembled as she read her. "These are deeds," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "To new homes, paid in full. In your names. I bought them months ago. Not because you deserve them, but because I needed to release myself from your shadows." Ryan looked at his page in disbelief. "You are giving us houses?" I nodded. "But there is a condition." They all looked up. "You will never contact me again." Their faces crumbled. "I do not want apologies. I do not want explanations. I do not want tears. I want silence." Michael stood up. "Emily, you are punishing us for one mistake." "One?" I laughed. "You threw me into the cold without proof. You erased me. 10 years of birthdays. 10 years of holidays. 10 years of pretending I was dead. That is not one mistake." They all looked broken, like their world had cracked open at the seams. I had given them everything they claimed to value: status, shelter, opportunity, and then ripped away the thing they had taken for granted: access to me. I walked to the door and opened it wide. "You can leave now." They stood slowly, one by one. They passed me in silence, clutching their deeds like lifelines. Madison paused at the door, her mascara smudged. "I am sorry," she said. I said nothing. When the last car pulled away, I closed the door gently behind them. For the first time in a decade, I felt free. But just as I turned to head back to the dining room, my phone buzzed. One new email. The subject line made my heart stop. Your family is not who you think they are. I stared at the subject line on my phone for a few seconds. My first instinct was to delete it. Anonymous drama was not new to me, but something about the timing, something about the phrasing, "Your family is not who you think they are," made my stomach twist. I opened the email. There was no name, no greeting, just one line. Check the date on the trust fund closure. Then ask yourself who signed the paperwork. I blinked, rereading it 3 times. The trust fund. My parents' will. The money they left for me when they died. I had always been told the trust was dissolved when I turned 8, that there had been barely anything left after legal fee. Michael had said the paperwork was handled years ago. I never thought to question it. Until now. I opened my encrypted business laptop and began searching. I still had access to a few probate court documents from the time I was forced out. It took less than 5 minutes to find the record. The trust was not closed when I was 18. It was closed when I was 22, just 2 weeks after they accused me of stealing the watch and kicked me out. And the signature on the closure documents? It was Ryan's. Not Michael's. Not Linda's. My brother's. My pulse thundered in my ears. The only way Ryan could have done that was if he had gained legal guardianship over my trust. That meant he must have petitioned for control behind my back, likely claiming I was unfit. And someone, a judge, maybe bribed or misled, had approved it. I felt sick. The money my parents left me, the future they wanted to secure for me, was stolen. Not by some shady banker or outside force. By my own brother. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo attachment. I clicked. It was grainy, clearly taken with an old phone, but unmistakable. It was Ryan and Bryce, standing outside a pawn shop, laughing, holding a small velvet box, the one that had held Michael's prized watch, the one I had been blamed for. The timestamp read April 13, 2014, the exact day I was thrown out. I collapsed onto the nearest chair. This was no longer just betrayal. This was calculated, engineered. They had not just abandoned me, they had buried me on purpose. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. I knew he would take care of digging deeper. Then, as if the universe was not done slapping me, I received a second email. This one came from Madison. "Emily, I know I am probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you something about our father. Meet me." I stared at the screen. For years, Madison had been the cruelest, the most entitled, the one who mocked my clothes, my job, my absence. And now she wanted a meeting? I almost said no. But curiosity can be louder than pride. We met the next morning in a small cafe 2 towns over. Neutral ground. Madison looked exhausted. No makeup. Hair in a bun. Not her usual polished self. She sat down and slid an envelope across the table. "I found this in Dad's safe. I was not supposed to. He left it open by mistake." I opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes. Old, faded, legal jargon mixed with scribbled anger. At the top of one page were 3 words that made my blood freeze. "Emily is not his." I looked up sharply. Madison swallowed hard. "I do not think Michael is your real father." I blinked. She nodded, lips trembling. "It explains a lot, right? Why he always treated you different. Why he never defended you." Mom. She knew. I think Ryan did too. I sat back, stunned. All these years I believed I was unloved, unwanted. But maybe I was just inconvenient. I flipped through more pages. Birth certificates, letters, hospital records. One line stood out. Adoption filed under sealed record. Biological father, Peter L. Rossner. Who was Peter Rossner? I had never heard the name. Madison leaned in. "There is more. Dad received money. From Peter. Regularly. I saw the bank transfers. I felt cold all over. He was paid to raise me?" Madison nodded slowly. "Until he stopped. That was the year you turned 16. That is when Dad changed toward. Everything fell into place. Michael had never loved me because I reminded him of another man. A man he hated. A man who had once paid him to pretend. This was not just rejection. This was business." I stood up, too dizzy to sit still. Madison reached out. "Emily, I am sorry. for everything. I looked at her, not with hatred, but with the calm fury that comes after the truth has scorched every corner of your soul. You should have come clean 10 years ago. Then I left. I drove aimlessly for an hour before finally pulling into the cemetery. My mother's grave sat under a willow tree, untouched by time, but heavy with silence. "I know now, Mom," I whispered, kneeling by the stone. "I know why you cried so much in those last months. I know what you were hiding." My phone buzzed again. A new message. This one just said, "He knows you found out. Be careful." I looked around, heart pounding. My car was empty. The road behind me was clear. But suddenly, I felt like I was being watched. Because this was not over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. My heart jumped. I lived alone, far from the city, with no neighbors nearby. The property was gated, security cameras lined the front, and I kept the doors locked religiously. I grabbed the small metal baseball bat I kept beside my bed and crept down the stairs, heart pounding. The kitchen window was smashed. Cold air rushed in through the broken pane, but nothing looked stolen. No signs of forced entry at the doors. Just that one broken window. And something new sitting on the counter. A single, sealed envelope. I picked it up with shaking hands. My name was handwritten on the front. Inside was a photograph, one that made my stomach turn. It was me, standing at my parents' grave just yesterday. Someone had been watching, not just from afar, from close enough to take a clear shot of my face. Behind the photo was a torn scrap of paper. It read, "You keep digging, you end up buried next." I backed away slowly, clutching the counter for balance. I had known this was dangerous, but this was a threat, a direct warning. I called the police, filed a report, and upgraded my security. But deep inside, I knew the person behind this had no fear of cops. They had already fooled judges, lied to lawyers, and walked away clean for a decade. This was a warning, and maybe a promise. That evening, my lawyer, Mr. Connors, called. He sounded breathless. "Emily," he said, "you need to hear this." I pulled records from the court archives. Ryan never had full power to close your trust. His petition was denied, but someone overrode it. It was signed off by a probate judge, one who was later disbarred for fraud. I felt my throat close. So they forged it? Worse, he said. They paid for it. I traced payments made to the judge's personal account. And guess who they came from? Michael? I asked. No, Bryce, your cousin. My mouth went dry. Bryce had always been Michael's shadow. He never went to college, never worked a stable job. But somehow, he always had money. New cars, expensive suits. He had been living large off my inheritance, while I was scraping pennies, working night shifts, and eating canned soup. I hung up the call and went straight to my wall safe. Inside was the USB drive I had kept hidden since the day I left home. The only thing I had taken from the house back then, purely out of instinct. At the time, it meant nothing. But now, I needed to see what was on it. Plugging it into my laptop, I opened the only folder. It contained dozens of audio recordings. Some were noisy and hard to hear, but one caught my attention right away. The file name was dated April 13, 2014, the day I was thrown out. I pressed play. "She will not fight back," Michael's voice said. "She is too soft. We blame the watch on her, and Ryan gets full access. Just make sure the paperwork goes through." A pause. Then Linda's voice. "And what about the trust? You know what your brother said. Bryce wants his cut. She will be out before sunset." Michael replied cold. "She is not family anyway." I stopped the recording. Not family. The words echoed louder than any scream. They had planned it, scripted it. It had never been about the watch. It had never been about disappointment or shame. It was about money and control and cutting me out before I could become a threat. I sent the file to my lawyer immediately. He called back 10 minutes later, voice crackling with excitement. "This is enough," he said. "We can take this to court. Not just for damages, Emily. We can sue for fraud, theft, and maybe even conspiracy." I should have felt relieved, but something still gnawed at me. Why now? Why were they suddenly so nervous, so shaken? What had changed in the last month that made them break into my home, send threats, and panic? That was when I remembered something strange. At the reunion, Bryce had mentioned selling a property, a house in Nevada that used to belong to my grandparents. He said it casually, but it stuck in my mind. I did some digging. The sale had never gone through because the property was never his. The deed had my name on it. My jaw dropped. It was left to me in my grandmother's will, a separate document that somehow never got mentioned after she passed. I pulled up the records, and there it was. Emily Hawthorne, sole heir. I booked a flight immediately. The house was in rough shape. Abandoned for years, it sat under layers of dust and time. But as I wandered through the attic, I found something that sent chills down my spine. A locked trunk. Inside were journals, dozens of them. My grandmother's handwriting filled the pages, most of them ramblings and notes about family drama, recipes, memories. But in one entry, dated just 2 weeks before she died, she had written, "If anything happens to me, Emily must know. Her real father was not Michael. His name is Peter Rossner. I begged her mother not to keep it from her. Michael found out years ago. That is when everything changed. I think he might do something. Desperate." I sat frozen for what felt like hours. This went deeper than I ever imagined. They had not just excluded me. They had been hiding a secret so dangerous they were willing to destroy me to keep it buried. But now I knew everything, and I was going to burn every lie they built to the ground. By the time I returned home from Nevada, a storm had already begun to brew. I walked into my house and found my lawyer sitting at the kitchen island. He looked pale. "You are not going to like this," he said, holding out his phone. "The story has leaked." He showed me the screen. A blog post. Headline in bold. "Heiress accuses family of fraud after a decade of silence. Claims secret paternity and conspiracy." It included a photo of me at the reunion, another of my childhood home, and audio clips, the very ones I had sent only to my lawyer. Someone had hacked his emails. And now the entire world was listening. Within 24 hours, my inbox was flooded. Journalists, bloggers, podcast hosts, some sympathetic, others hungry for blood. One particularly cruel email read, "So, how does it feel to know your entire family hates you and you are just a bastard after all?" I slammed my laptop shut. I did not care about gossip, but I cared about control. And they were trying to seize the narrative before I could. That was when I made a decision. I would not hide anymore. I planned a press conference. My lawyer advised against it, but I insisted. I stood in front of my new house, reporters swarming the driveway, cameras flashing like lightning. I read a statement from a single sheet of paper. I was disowned without reason. I was robbed of a future. But I survived. And now I hold the proof. The people who should have protected me betrayed me. And one day, very soon, they will face justice in a court of law. I paused. Then I looked directly at the camera. And if they have more secrets to hide, they had better bury them deeper. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. A voice whispered on the other end, "You think this is over? You do not even know half the truth." Then the line went dead. I tried tracing it. No luck. It was a burner phone, but it did not end there. 2 days later, my lawyer discovered new documents, ones that were never entered into probate court. A second will. A revised version of my parents' original estate plan. It named me as the sole heir. No shared trust. No joint guardianship. It even outlined that if anything ever happened to them, Michael was not to be trusted with financial control. The document had been signed, notarized, and sealed, but never filed. The witness signatures were real. I tracked down one of the witnesses, now in her 80s, living in Florida. She confirmed it. Said she remembered my parents were nervous that day, especially my mother. She told me, the woman said, "If anything ever happens to us, Emily needs to be protected." From Michael. I hung up the phone, shaking. My own mother had known. She had feared what he would become. I thought that was the final piece, the end of the puzzle. Until the day Michael showed up at my house, unannounced. I looked out the window and saw his familiar black car pulling up. He stepped out, older now, hair thinning, face tighter with stress, but the same cold eyes. He did not come alone. Bryce, Ryan, and Linda were with him. They walked right up to my door and rang the bell. I opened it without a word. There was a long silence. None of them spoke first. I stood there, blocking the threshold, unblinking. Then Michael said, "We want to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "Now you want to talk?" He glanced behind him at Bryce, who nodded. Michael took a deep breath. "We made a mistake." I did not flinch. "Which one? Throwing me out? Stealing from me? Or hiding who my real father was?" His face twitched. "We will give you the money. All of it. The inheritance. The properties. Everything. Just drop the case." Linda added quickly, "And stop talking to reporters. This is humiliating for all of us." That was when I smiled, because finally the panic was showing. I said, "You are not here because of shame. You are here because you know if this goes to trial, your whole world collapses, and your secrets will not survive the sunlight." They exchanged nervous glances. Then I dropped the final blow. I already spoke to Peter Rossner. Michael turned white. Bryce stepped forward. "You what?" I nodded slowly. "He is alive, and he remembers everything. He has documents, letters from my mother, DNA tests, and he is willing to testify." Michael whispered, "That man ruined everything." "No," I said sharply. "You did." Then I stepped aside and motioned toward the grand entryway of my house. "Come in." They looked at me like I had lost my mind, but they walked in, one by one, curious, confused. And then they saw it. Dozens of faces. Journalists, lawyers, camera crew, already rolling. Live stream in progress. Michael spun toward me, seething. "What is this?" I looked him dead in the eye. "This is me, finally taking my place. Not the broken girl you threw out. Not the invisible niece. I am the owner of this house. I am the heir of this family. And from this moment on, I own the story." They tried to leave, but by then it was too late. The footage went viral. Every word, every stunned expression, every ounce of guilt, rage, and silence they had buried for 10 years exposed to the world. The footage from that confrontation flooded social media faster than I expected. Within hours, clips were dissected by commentators, stitched into TikToks, quoted by Twitter accounts with millions of followers. The hashtag #TherylHarris trended for 3 days straight. I watched it unfold from my kitchen, coffee in hand, feeling nothing. No joy, no vindication, just silence. Then the real calls began. Sponsors, book agents, interview requests from primetime shows, even a documentary producer from Netflix. Everyone wanted a piece of the scandal. Everyone wanted to brand me as the woman who took down her entire family and claimed what was hers. But I did not respond. I had one priority now, court. Michael tried to get the trial dismissed. He filed countersuits, claimed defamation, breach of privacy, emotional distress. His lawyers argued that I had manipulated public opinion unfairly. But the judge was not interested in theatrics, especially after my team submitted the revised will and Peter Rossner's sworn testimony. He stood in court, gray-haired, proud, trembling slightly, and recounted the truth. How he and my mother had fallen in love before she met Michael. How she had been forced to marry Michael under family pressure because Peter had no welfare standing. How my mother had never stopped writing to him. And how, before she died, she had sent him a DNA test confirming he was my biological father. The courtroom was frozen. Michael's face collapsed in real time. Linda gasped, and the jury watched it all unfold, horror growing by the minute. By the third day, their side crumbled. They offered a settlement, not just of the inheritance, but also property, investments, even the family foundation Michael had chaired for years. They wanted it all buried, but I refused. I wanted judgment. The final verdict came in just 1 week later. The court declared the revised will valid. I was awarded 100% of my rightful inheritance, over $22 million in assets, properties in 3 states, and exclusive ownership of the family's publishing company. Michael, Bryce, and Ryan were fined for conspiracy, document suppression, and fraud. Linda was forced to resign from every board she sat on. Their reputations shredded. Their legacy gone. But there was one thing I had not anticipated. A letter. After the ruling, the court clerk approached me with an envelope marked in delicate cursive for Emily, from Mother. Inside was a letter my mother had left with the lawyer who prepared her revised will. He had never been able to send it because he passed away before the documents could be filed. It had been discovered during the probate audit. I opened it with shaking finger and read, "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened. I hope you are strong. I hope you remember who you are. I am sorry I could not protect you from them. I wanted to. I tried. But fear is a terrible prison, and I was not brave until it was too late. Your father is a kind man. Not perfect, but he loved me deeply. I hope you find him if you have not already. He would be proud of you. Do not let them define you. Not by blood. Not by legacy. Burn the whole house down if you, and then build something better. Yours forever, Mom." I cried for the first time in years, not from pain, but from the weight of finally being seen. Weeks passed. The media storm slowed. I made a public donation of half my inheritance to fund scholarships for young girls in foster care, the ones no one ever chooses, the ones who feel invisible, like I once did. I also met with Peter again. We talked for hours. It was awkward at first, but honest. I learned that he had followed my life from afar, that he had watched me grow up in photos sent secretly by my mother. He cried when he saw me in person. I held his hand and said, "You did not lose me. I just took the long way back." Then came the final twist. I received a letter from a private investigator I had hired long before the trial. He had found something strange, a bank account. It was opened under a fake name managed by someone who had worked for Michael. The account had over $2 million in it, all withdrawn from my inheritance over 10 years ago. Michael had funneled it quietly, but the investigator traced it all the way back and found that it had been used to fund Bryce's startup, which meant Bryce's success, the company he always bragged about, was built with stolen money. I called him. He picked up, silent. I said, "You owe me more than money." He whispered, "I know. I am not taking your company," I said. "Not unless you cross me again." Then I hung up. Some victories do not require total destruction, just the power to choose what comes next. Now, I live peacefully. I do not attend family reunions. I host my own. For chosen family, friends who were there when I had nothing, women who lift each other up, strangers who found strength in my story. Sometimes I walk through the halls of my new house and remember the girl I used to be, the one begging to belong. She's gone now. In her place stands a woman who knows that sometimes being excluded is the greatest freedom of all. Because when they showed up at my house, pale and shaking, expecting forgiveness or fear, all I gave them was the truth, and that truth set me free. If this story moved you or kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe for more powerful, twist-filled stories like this. Every day, we bring you real, emotional journeys that hit deep. Do not miss the next one. Hit that subscribe button and join the community.